Hi, my name is Kate, and I love to read. Like, I was carrying books around with me before Kindles were a thing. So I decided to start a podcast where I interview the authors of some of my favorite books, ask them all of my questions so that I can read between the lines of the books. Welcome back to another episode of Between the Lines. I'm here with Allison Buccola, who wrote Catch Her When She Falls. When I picked it up, I could not put it back down. So you need to add it to all of your list if you haven't read it already. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here.
You are so welcome. I'm so excited that we get to talk about this. So before we get into the book, let's kind of just talk about you. So when did you know that you wanted to write a book, or kind of when did you know you wanted to be an author?
So I always loved writing. From like I was writing books as a like probably 7-8-year-old, and enjoyed doing it up through college. And then when I was trying to figure out what to do, I ended up doing what I think a lot of people who like writing do, and I went to law school after college, which was fun and was great, and was a lot of like lawyering involves a lot of writing too. So that was I really enjoyed that, and I think it was helpful in like developing diligence and habits that help you actually like finish writing projects.
Right.
But then when I found out I was pregnant with my son, I wanted to stay home with him and wanted to really give like writing fiction a real shot. So then ended up doing that, and that's how Catch Her When She Falls came about.
That's awesome. So I hadn't heard of anyone talking about going to law school as kind of helping, but I have actually talked to other authors who are lawyers, so I hadn't even thought of that before, but there is so much writing involved there.
Oh yeah, and a lot of deadlines, and I think that's
I
think that's really helpful, where you just kind of get used to like you sit down and you really have to write something. So I think that helped.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what is your writing process like for fiction then? So it's probably a little bit different than when you were writing for legal stuff, but how do you approach writing novels?
Yeah, so I'm not an outliner. I usually start out with like a character and sort of a conflict. So in this book, the character is Micah, who's when she was in high school, her boyfriend was convicted of murdering her best friend. And so I sort of started out with that scenario and how she felt about it, and then the story sort of developed from there. And I guess sort of more technically, I go about writing by I do the like word count, like daily word count thing.
Yeah.
So I set myself a goal for 500 words a day and try to hit that. And if I get more than that, then that's awesome. But I try to make sure that I'm doing like at least 500 words a day to just kind of keep the project going. And that's
that makes sense. I wondered if it was going to be something like that when you were saying like the diligence and kind of the deadlines. I wondered if you would be someone who kind of did approach it with the word count. So that makes total sense. How do you create your characters then? So do you mostly know who they are? Like, do you kind of plan out who the character is, or do they kind of reveal themselves to you as you write?
I think in this one, they really revealed themselves as I was writing. So I sort of started out with like a more general idea of who Micah was and what she was going through. And it wasn't until probably maybe the second draft where I like really felt like I had a firm grasp on like who she was and what she was doing and like the particulars of her.
Yeah.
As opposed to just sort of a more abstract idea of who this character was.
Yeah. So how would you describe Catch Her When She Falls, just like in a couple of sentences?
So I sort of touched on it a little bit before, but it's a psychological thriller. It's about Micah, her boyfriend's convicted of murdering her best friend, and it's now 10 years later, and she's moved back to her hometown, and she is starting to get some reminders of the past that are making her question whether she really understands what happened that night. And she starts looking into it, and things sort of start unraveling from there.
Yeah, they really do. Where did you get the idea for it, or what prompted you to write this story?
So when I started writing it, I was listening to a lot of true crime podcasts. And so I was sort of thinking about them and thinking about some of the family members and the friends that were interviewed as part of these podcasts, and thinking about like what their reaction would be to having these cases reopened. And so then I started thinking about the character of Micah and what her reaction would be, just because she's in such a weird sort of like nebulous spot. Like she doesn't really know how she feels about Emily and Emily's death. Like Emily was her best friend, but also Emily was having an affair with Alex, her boyfriend, and then Alex was her boyfriend. So she's in sort of this weird, like she has this relationship to at least the purported murderer.
Right.
So I just started trying to think about like what her reaction would be to like this new attention. And it sort of came from there.
Nice. So if you were going to cast the main characters for a TV or a movie, do you have any ideas who you would cast for the main characters?
I have some ideas. I've got 2 small kids, so my like movie knowledge is really out of date
Yeah.
at this point. I think like Emma Stone could be fun for Micah.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of Ryan, and the best person I could come up with is like Tobey Maguire, but he's almost 50 now. So
that's a good point.
So there's a young version of him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like really behind on this, but have you watched Yellow Jackets?
Yes, I was going to say that this book, like if you enjoyed that TV show, you would enjoy the book. It kind of reminded me of parts of it.
It's so good. I just started it. And Misty, Christina Ricci's character, I feel like I've been like thinking about Julia while watching her character.
Yeah.
So if I can get her to do that for a TV show or movie, that would be
that would be
awesome.
So cool. Yeah, that role, like she just plays it so perfectly. Like
she's amazing.
The whole way through. She's fantastic in that. So would you rather have it be a TV show or a movie if it was going to get picked up, or do you really have a preference?
I feel like I watch a lot more TV shows these days, so I think it could be kind of fun, and it could be kind of fun to see how the the relationships between the characters are developed out in a TV show.
Yeah,
I always wonder about that because that's like it's a lot of content.
Right,
that's like 10 hours. So the like adaptation from book to TV show seems tricky, and I wonder how it works.
Yeah. Ever since I've been kind of asking people that question on the podcast, I've been thinking about it more frequently, like when I'm reading a book, like would this be better for TV or for a movie? And some of them where like it really is kind of more like all happens in one day. I feel like it kind of would be good as a movie, but when I was reading yours too, like there's so much timeline hopping and there is so much going on where I was like, I feel like this one would be good as a TV show just because there's like so much going on that I feel like you could fill that time.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say one book adaptation that I was watching recently was Little Fires Everywhere.
Yes.
And it was kind of cool to see how that happened. I loved the book.
Yeah.
And I really loved the TV show too.
Yep.
But it's fun to see like how TV shows like take things in a different direction because there's a lot added on.
Yeah.
And a lot explored. So.
Yeah, I loved the adaptation and the book, but I like burned through it on I think it was Hulu in like a few days because I was like it was so like captivating the way they told it with that. The other one I was watching was, what is it called? Oh, it was on Apple TV, and I don't know why I can't think of it right now, but it had Octavia Spencer in it, and it was another book to TV adaptation, and they even like changed the title of it, so like the book title was different than the TV title, and then they actually like kept writing the second season, like not without the author necessarily, but they like continued it on past where she had even written. So it's just fascinating seeing all the different things they do with adaptations.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna dive into spoilers next. So if you haven't read the book yet, just pause, go read it, and then come listen again. If you have already read the book, obviously you can keep listening through. So one of the things that I really enjoyed about the book was the disjointed kind of storytelling. So it's kind of set up that the main character is like driving to see someone, and she's kind of thinking back on everything that's happened while she's driving. So it allowed you to kind of jump around throughout the timelines. So did you set up the story to tell it that way, to kind of like add to the confusion that Micah's feeling, or were you just kind of rolling with it and it came to you?
It was a little bit of both. So I started out writing the story. The story was more linear in the first draft.
Okay.
Which was helpful because it like sort of helped me figure out like what happens in this story, especially since I'm not an outliner.
Yeah.
But I like finished that draft and was like trying to figure out how to like add more urgency to Micah's situation.
Yeah.
And like mystery around it. So it did come out of like wanting to double the story onto itself to just to sort of like bring out what was going on with Micah more.
Yeah, it definitely felt like it added to like the intensity of like where she was headed, because she's also like thinking back on everything that's been happening. So I felt like it added to the suspense for sure. There were also kind of like multiple references to like being near windows or on balconies, and like it as the main characters, not as Emily who died falling out of a window, but references to the other characters being around that. Were you kind of using those references to like build up the intensity around Emily's death, or was it just like you were going to kind of keep referencing it?
Yeah, that's interesting. The balconies, I was definitely thinking explicitly of Emily's death when writing about those. The windows I had less in mind, but it is funny how I know there were like a few different images when I was writing the story where I like definitely did not intentionally have them in mind to foreshadow what happens at the end.
Right.
But then going back through it and reading it when I was revising, I was like, oh, these are definitely in here because the ending is in mind and it's driving toward that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it was like already in your head. So it was kind of like coming out in other areas.
Right.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So did you know from the beginning when you started writing it how Emily was going to die, or did you decide that later on?
I didn't. So I did just start out with Micah and the fact that this death had happened. And it was really more, it started out thinking about like Micah and her mindset. And so that's why it was so helpful to write it in a linear way first and then go back and change it to sort of help figure things out. And things did change as the drafting went on and revisions took place. But it was kind of fun to like figure it out for myself while writing.
That's cool. That's like what I've really enjoyed about talking to multiple different authors is everyone's approach is everyone has had kind of a different answer in their approach. And some people have said like they write specifically for the twist, and so they have to know it when they start it.
Right.
And then some people are like, no, sometimes I write things and I don't even know how I'm gonna explain them at the end of the book. And so it's been fascinating just hearing how many different ways you can arrive at a story and finish a story, basically.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think different things work for everyone.
Right. So once we kind of mentioned that you kind of got the idea from listening to true crime podcasts. And so once Micah discovers kind of like a true crime blog more than anything, but it's kind of a similar idea. There's kind of some commentary on true crime blogs and also like how they're affecting the family members. So at one point, one of the characters even says it's sensationalized gossip mongering. They dig into these traumatic events like they're just fodder for entertainment and pick apart people who are hurting or recovering or just trying to live their lives. It's disgusting. So that's what one of the characters says about it. And it has been something really interesting that I feel like I've heard more in society, a conversation about it in general lately. Truth Be Told is the other show that I was just thinking about. And they kind of cover that in the show where it's like, are her actions of podcasting hurting the survivors or the people that were involved in the crime? So what are your thoughts on true crime blogs and podcasts?
Yeah, I think I think I probably feel similarly to like most or a lot of people where I feel a little conflicted about it. Like I love them and I love listening to them. And like I said, when I started listening to this, started writing this, I was listening to a bunch of them. I'm like listening to My Favorite Murder all the time. And, and I love those shows. But I do feel a little bit, it does feel voyeuristic. I mean, I think it is voyeuristic.
It is. Yeah.
And I don't think there's any getting away from that. And I feel a little bit like Micah, I guess, where I'm like, well, but I'm doing it, so I guess it's okay because like I'm doing it and what I do is fine.
Right.
And so I don't know. I feel like I do rationalize for myself listening to them.
Yeah.
But it's probably not. I don't know. I
right.
feel, it is something that I sometimes feel bad about.
Yeah, it's so tricky because I don't listen to them necessarily. I haven't really ever gotten into them, but I read a lot of fiction that is so similar to it, and I hadn't really thought about it honestly until I watched Truth Be Told. I was like, oh yeah. So even if you are just kind of trying to cover a story, you are having to like bring up all that pain for people again. I hadn't thought about it at all, kind of just because I necessarily didn't listen to tons of them. But I read so much that's similar, and so I think sometimes it is a little bit easier to like get into a story when you know it's fiction compared to someone else's life. But I feel like there also probably are approaches to it that can still be like respectful of the people involved. So I'm sure that still exists out there as well.
I think so too. And I mean, I think it is true that there is like good that comes out of it. Like it is good for some of these cases to get more attention, and it's helpful for people to be like shining lights on some of this stuff. But yeah, I think it depends, and it's the sort of thing that has to be approached carefully,
right,
and thoughtfully.
Yeah, definitely. So also throughout the book, there are kind of multiple times that Micah is referencing that she was just trying to do the right thing. So kind of when she's talking about not mentioning that she saw Joshua there, or telling the truth that Alex wasn't there. She kind of keeps saying over and over, I was just trying to do the right thing. I was just trying to do the right thing. So what do you think ultimately at the end makes her kind of like not do the right thing when she knows that Alex is innocent, but she isn't necessarily going to do anything to resolve her part in it and or just to like help the police know that he's not innocent? What do you think made that change for her?
Yeah, I think Micah's a rationalizer. And so a lot of the book is about her own rationalizations, her own way of processing what happened in the past.
Yeah.
And trying to feel better about what happened and trying to sort of project blame elsewhere. And I think it is so Micah finds out that it's not Alex, but I think it really is true that there's not a great way for her to help him without potentially putting herself at risk. Because she does, like, in some ways she looks guilty, and she's there, and she knows that like Joshua could say something about her like presence there if she tries to do the right thing. She's also just like maimed Ryan, so she doesn't look stable.
Yeah.
And it really is true that like she could be at a lot of risk if she went back and did something. And I think it's hard to do the right thing in like that kind of situation. So I think that's why she struggled with it at the end. I think also just from like a narrative perspective, since the book was so much about Micah's rationalization and about like her sort of struggling to come to terms with the fact that she like hadn't done the right thing in the past,
right,
and wasn't doing the right thing now, like breaking into Julia's house, probably not like actually okay.
Yeah.
I like, it felt like if she like then turned around at the end and did the right thing, then you could still see it as sort of like her hero's journey, where she's all these things that she did, like they might not have been great in like at the moment, but they still like worked out, and she still freed Alex. And so if she had done the right thing at the end, I think it would have like allowed for us to sort of like rationalize what she had been doing through the book. So I think that's sort of why it ended up the way that it did. Yeah,
I did not even catch that. That makes so much sense, because it wasn't that she had actually done the right thing. So the fact that she was saying it to herself over and over again was actually more because she knew she hadn't told everything to begin with even.
Right. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. So where can people find you and follow you? Just kind of like plug whatever you want to plug.
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram. So my Instagram is Allison Buccola. I'm also on Twitter and not as active, but I'm on there. So that's also Allison Buccola. And my website is also all easy. It's also AllisonBuccola.com. Random House has put together some cool book club kits, and those are on their website and they're on my website. And I'm happy to do like book club appearances or anything if people have book clubs and are interested. And the book is just available. So so yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show and talking about your book. Yeah, and then hopefully everybody goes and follows all those so that they can stay updated and see what you have coming up next.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is so much fun.